Wrestle Machine here. Brock smashed, UFC 121, Undertaker incident, Vince lawsuit, more coverage and more. Like, comment, subscribe please human. November 1, 2010 Observer Newsletter, Brock smashed, UFC 121, Undertaker incident, Vince lawsuit, more. By Observer staff. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. ISSN 10839593. November 1, 2010. The first time I heard of Cain Velasquez was a little more than 4 years ago, when he first came to San Jose shortly after the 2006 NCAA wrestling tournament. Pretty quickly you started to hear the rumblings about this guy in the gym who was an awesome wrestler, who never got tired. He used to train with former UFC and Strikeforce heavyweight title contender Paul Buntello, and from the start, would throw Buntello, at the time a named fighter, around, after just a few weeks of training. Buntello, primarily a striker, never got much practice at his specialty when sparring with Velasquez. One day, Buntello asked if they could just go at it with no takedowns. He sold the idea that Velasquez needed to focus on the stand-up game, plus he'd taken enough beatings and it was time for his revenge. With only a few months training, Velasquez then beat him down standing. The monster Cain became almost this mythical creature in the gym, stalking his prey. Fighters would wear it as a badge of honor that they sparred with him. They'd mostly get destroyed, but they'd win respect for surviving. He fought exactly twice in those early years. Guys would agree to fight and then somehow they'd hear the stories and pull out. Injuries, both real and imagined. Sometimes they didn't even bother to make up injuries. He was supposed to start with Strikeforce, but Scott Coker couldn't get him an opponent and he never fought for them. People in the gym were talking that he would be the guy who could someday in a few years beat Fedor Emelianenko. His trainer, Javier Mendez, labeled him the single most talented fighter ever to walk through the doors of the American Kickboxing Academy, which was a pretty big statement considering that would include people like BJ Penn, Lyoto Machida, Frank Shamrock, Kung La, Josh Koscheck, Jake Shields, John Fitch, Gilbert Melendez and a multitude of others who were established stars and champions in the sport. He was saying this at a time when he had faced nobody that anyone would know. After only 2 fights, far quicker than anyone in his camp wanted, he signed with UFC in early 2008, simply because he wasn't getting any opponents. Once in UFC, the pattern continued. After he destroyed Jake O'Brien, he became difficult to book. Joe Silva didn't want to put him in with top guys, because of his experience level. But nobody else would fight him. The reason Denis Stojnic got a shot at UFC was because they had to find someone out in Yugoslavia who would agree to face him. But once he looked human against Czech Congo, the fight his detractors would continually bring up to say he had no chance against Brock Lesnar, he graduated to name fighters who weren't afraid of him. Still, many questioned his chin, being staggered several times by Congo. They questioned his punching power, since he threw so many punches against Congo, Stojnic, and Ben Rothwell, and while he overwhelmed all of them, he didn't show much power in his punches. His knockout of Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira in February was dismissed because Nogueira was labeled a shot fighter. They questioned his wrestling, since Stojnic, who isn't even a wrestler, blocked a few of his takedowns. But through all the criticism, Velasquez in 8 pro fights had not only finished 7 men, never lost a match, never lost a round, and had never even been on the defensive for longer than 10 seconds in any fight, the latter stat almost unheard of when you were talking about someone who had graduated to main event status. The marketing for UFC 121 was built around Cain Velasquez's quest to become the first Mexican to win a World Heavyweight Championship in combat sports. The promotional idea likely came from Mendez, who had been using that phrase since not all that long after Velasquez showed up in his gym. However, even though it turned out to be a rousing success, the promotion drew a lot of criticism. Some brought up Rico Rodriguez, who is from both Puerto Rican and Mexican descent and was UFC heavyweight champion in late 2002 and early 2003. Others mentioned Chris Arreola, a Mexican-American who held some Alphabet Soup boxing heavyweight titles, notably the NABF title, although lost when challenging Vitaly Klitschko a year ago for the more legitimate WBC title. Others were critical, saying he wasn't even Mexican, since he was born in Salinas, California and lived most of his life in Arizona, and while both his parents were born in Mexico, he never grew up speaking Spanish, just learning the language in recent years. Standing in his way was Brock Lesnar. Velasquez is quiet and not naturally charismatic. But on the flip side, he is very likable and comes off as completely real. There is no one mold that all superstars have to fit into. At the end of the day, probably the single biggest lesson about promoting you can learn is, what gets over, is what gets over. Some can predict pretty well. None come close to batting even 90%. You can figure out why after it happens. Sometimes a quiet guy who tames a monster in record time, who becomes a hero to his ethnic community and dominates over time, can become a major superstar. And very often, someone who is big with one community that makes it appear he's a superstar, will be then recognized as a superstar by the public. The marketing drew an interesting reaction. The commercials played so often that within the Mexican-American community, and outside it as well, people who didn't know Velasquez, didn't follow UFC, and some of whom didn't even know Lesnar, knew about a Mexican trying to be the first world heavyweight champion. The awareness of this show was huge. Many people who have never seen UFC were interested. The reaction at bars and theaters, most, but not all, of which drew numbers like the biggest UFC events to date, was how many Mexican Americans were in the place, a demographic UFC had been trying without a lot of success to hit since that audience so strongly supports boxing and pro wrestling. A wise old booker with decades of watching the business named Dory Funk Jr. told me nearly 30 years ago about drawing minorities to wrestling, that also works with combat sports. The idea of drawing a minority group by putting people from that group on the card means nothing. Unless they are in the top position, it's not going to click. People want to support their champions, not just see the people they can relate to be on the show. UFC tried with Roger Herta, and it didn't work even though he looked like a star, talked like a star and had a marketable life story, because he wasn't able to get to championship level. Tito Ortiz tried, but never connected because there was a certain phoniness to his approach. The marketing clearly worked for this show. How big a star, a draw and a hero to Mexican Americans Velasquez can be depends on a number of factors, based on a combination of how he handles the rough road of instant success, and where his title reign goes from here. Velasquez beat a bigger, stronger, faster and better athlete to win the title because he was the better fighter. Lesnar surprisingly came out fast, probably because nobody expected he would. There were a few key moments in the fight, that only went 4-12. The first was when Lesnar took Velasquez down, and he got up immediately without being hurt. The second was when that happened a second time. The third was when Velasquez took him down. Even with his size, he was unable to dominate with wrestling. And for all the talk of how hard he could punch and how well he could take a punch, he didn't land, and he didn't react well to getting hit. The match was not the long war many envisioned, but one of the most exciting short fights in history. The pop when he won the title ranked with Randy Couture's win over Tim Sylvia and George St. Pierre's win over Matt Serra as the loudest and most sustained in UFC history. One veteran sportscaster who has been to 2,000 live events over his career said it was the loudest pop he had ever heard at a sporting event. Velasquez handled the pressure of being in a mega event. He had been in the NCAA tournament, but was never expected to win, nor was he ever considered one of the big stars coming in. Lesnar, on the other hand, had been there. He had only main evented one show in his career, in Australia. Lesnar had main evented countless wrestling shows, 2 in front of 50,000 fans, and was the focal point of every UFC event he was on, including the biggest one in history. But now he's the target, with people watching his tapes looking to find the holes to exploit. Velasquez's next night will be against Junior Dos Santos, probably in the spring. It's a completely different challenge. Dos Santos has better boxing. The key will be Dos Santos' takedown defense, and his ability to hurt Velasquez early. Dos Santos got tired in the second round against Roy Nelson. If he can't take Velasquez out early, that will work against him in a 5-round fight. Shane Carwin is getting older and is battling the injuries that come from a lifetime of playing football, wrestling and fighting. He's dangerous as hell for a few minutes because of his punching power, but if he doesn't finish Velasquez in the first round, his odds go down. Roy Nelson has a puncher's chance, but the odds are against him. Frank Mir may not be quick enough standing. Mirko Cro Cop and Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira are past their day. Dos Santos absolutely can win, but the most dangerous opponent would still be Lesnar, if he wants it badly enough and trains his weaknesses. What Lesnar wants to do next is the unanswered question. Lesnar would likely be offered a fight with Mir. He would be favored in that fight, and due to his marketability, should he win, he'd likely be back in the title picture. But there's a reality in Lesnar versus Velasquez matchup. If both show up at their best, Lesnar can't beat him only by wrestling. Of all the aspects of Lesnar's game, it is the wrestling game he won't be making much improvement in, and while he may win a straight wrestling match, he can't hold him down long enough to dominate a 5-round fight. It's up to improving his stand-up, and Lesnar may be too big to be a great striker, but if he can defend well enough, and land a good power shot, he can still be dangerous. Right now Lesnar, the biggest star in the sport last week, faces a lot of questions. It was the second straight fight he was overwhelmed by punches. He was unable to use his biggest strength, his wrestling, to overpower people who weren't quite as good as him at wrestling, but were top-flight wrestlers themselves. While Lesnar was lauded for being able to come back against Carwin, if Carwin had a gas tank, the two fighters may not have been all that different. Lesnar can use his wrestling to take out non-wrestlers, but in this sport, at the top level, if you go in with wrestlers close enough to your level that they can defend your takedown, wrestling alone is no longer going to win you fights. The show on October 23 at the Honda Center in Anaheim drew 14,856 fans, which was just shy of a sellout. The paid attendance was 12,796 and the gate was $2,237,070. The Spike prelims did a 1.03 rating and 1.54 million viewers, the third best number out of the 12 similar shows in history, after doing low-end numbers the past several fights. The show did a 1.42 in both males 18 to 34 and 35 to 49. The earliest pay-per-view numbers, which this early in the game is at best a rough estimate, is slightly more than 1 million, putting it in the same range as all the biggest events in company history except UFC 100. It's too early to tell if it beat the numbers for the Lesnar vs. Shane Carwin fight. Carwin was a bigger star, and because of his knockout finishes and bigger size, to the public, had a better chance to win. Velasquez, if numbers are better, would have proven to be a better draw based on the stronger hype specials and being an ethnic draw. The build-up to this fight had 3 of the 6 biggest hype show numbers in UFC history, during a time period when most company TV numbers have been way down. Velasquez was interesting because most of the public felt Lesnar was simply too big and too strong for him. The vast majority within the industry expected him to win the title, although not quite as quickly or as brutally. The other key match was controversial in a number of ways. Jake Shields, the former Strikeforce middleweight champion and Elite XC welterweight champion, won a close split decision in his UFC debut over Martin Kampmann. The week of the fight, Dana White announced that if Shields won, he would get the shot at the GSP vs. Josh Koscheck winner. The announcement was a strong statement about John Fitch, the fighter with the second-best record of anyone in UFC history, behind Anderson Silva, who is in a different weight class, and who had won a top contenders match winning 3 straight rounds over Thiago Alves. But Fitch has had a string of boring fights. The problem is, Shields, when it comes to excitement, was Strikeforce's version of Fitch. He also has a great record, 15 straight wins over the last 6 years. But few exciting fights. Shields vs. Kampmann was dull-lived. Shields, who dropped 20 pounds in the last day to make 170.5 pounds, looked drawn at weigh-ins and not much better the day of the show. He then got tired in the second round, due to the weight cut. Kampmann wasn't able to keep his distance and turn it into the striking game he figured to dominate. Shields was very lucky to get the decision. I had Kampmann winning the second and third rounds. The Observer website poll had 45% for Shields, 44% for Kampmann and 11% had it a draw. Fightmetric listed the fight as too close to call and ruled it a draw. Most, but not all the reporters had Kampmann winning the second and third rounds in the match, 29 to 28. Kampmann did more damage and even had some near submissions once Shields got tired. But after the show, White said Shields would be the one getting the next title shot. Questions will also come out of the show regarding the futures of Tito Ortiz and Gabriel Gonzaga. Ortiz, one of the biggest stars in the sport's history, in his first match coming back after neck surgery, held up well and was competitive in losing a decision to Matt Hamill. Ortiz all week seemed to be politicking in case he lost. He wore a t-shirt to weigh-ins that read "Dana is my hero." He offered no injury excuses like his loss to Forrest Griffin in his prior fight, but did say few could come back and fight after the surgeries he had, and he had taken a year off and wasn't at his best. Ortiz showed he can still be competitive with the mid-level light heavyweights, but he's paid like a pay-per-view headliner, a role he can't play anymore. He simply can't be pushed to the level his contract would dictate he would need to be pushed at, similar to Mirko Cro Cop. The question in both cases is, do you cut a big name and make him available for the opposition? Gonzaga lost all 3 rounds, and appeared slow, against Brendan Schaub, and his record fell to 11-6. Several others on the show would be at least in danger of being cut. Gilbert Yvel has no takedown defense, and at this stage of the game, is never going to get any. You can't survive as a UFC heavyweight with that hole in your game. Mike Gaiman lost in 109. Patrick Cote did nothing for 3 rounds against Tom Lawlor in a dull fight. Aside from the main event, the most excitement and best fight on the show was Diego Sanchez's 3-round win over Paulo Thiago. Sanchez, who has returned to the Greg Jackson camp, said that he had been partying too much and was back to business and looked like a different fighter than the one who could do little with John Hathaway in his prior fight. Sanchez fought his style of fight, working at a fast pace and wearing out someone every bit as skilled who simply couldn't keep up the pace. Another thing noteworthy was the reaction Josh Koscheck got. During the Court McGee vs. Ryan Jensen fight, there was loud booing and people stopped watching the fight. From where I was sitting, I couldn't see anything, but everyone around me figured there was a big fight and people were getting arrested. Then the crowd started loudly chanting GSP, and we figured it had to be Koscheck. Later, when he came to ringside, the same thing happened, only this time louder because almost everyone could see him. I've seen fighters get that kind of a reaction when they are shown on the screen, but not just walking into the arena. It was clear that a high percentage of the crowd is watching this season of Tough and hating Koscheck. The 12-11 show is going to be a big one. 1. John Madsen, 7-0, beat Gilbert Yvel, 36-16-1, won no contest, in 148. Madsen is part of Brock Lesnar's team and was a high school rival of Lesnar's. Yvel is a veteran with no takedown defense. Madsen got the takedown, pinned Yvel against the cage and threw punch after punch. Yvel couldn't get out of the position and ref John McCarthy stopped the fight. Yvel has no future here. Madsen got $16,000 for the win and Yvel got $30,000 for the loss. Keep in mind that everyone makes more than these listed figures and some considerably more. 2. Chris Camozzi, 14-3, beat Dongyi Yang, 9-1, via split decision on scores of 29-28, 28-29 and 29-28. Yang used a bomb eye lock and slam in the first round, followed by a wicked hammer fist. Yang landed and got Z control and Camozzi's back, but Camozzi reversed on the ground. They ended up on their feet. Camozzi pinned Yang against the fence and threw knees. Camozzi used his reach to land, and then they traded punches. Yang landed a good counter right late. I had the first round for Yang. Second round saw Yang get the takedown, get Camozzi's back and worked for a choke. He was on Camozzi's back and was so high on the back he fell off. Both guys started to tire in the round but they continued landing. Camozzi landed several knees. Yang landed a left and Camozzi started bleeding from the right eye. 2 hard punches by Yang in the waning seconds. Close round that ended up being the difference maker. Camozzi started landing in the third, including a hard right early. Yang tired a judo throw but couldn't get it. Yang's nose was busted and blood was all over his face. Both traded until the round ended. Third round finish was very good. When Camozzi won, Yang's corner acted horrified. There were more boos than expected for the decision. Camozzi got $16,000 for the win and Yang got $8,000 for the loss. 3. Sam Stout, 17-6-1, beat Paul Taylor, 10-6-1, won no contest, via scores of 29-28, 28-29 and 30-27. All 3 rounds were close so pretty much any score could be argued for. It was mostly a 3-round kickboxing match. Crowd wasn't really into it, but a good stand-up fight. Stout got $32,000 for the win and Taylor got $16,000 for the loss. 4. Daniel Roberts, 11-1, beat Mike Guyman, 13-4-1, via Darce choke in 109. Roberts came out aggressive early and caught Guyman in the submission. Roberts got $86,000 for the win, which included a $70,000 bonus for best submission of the night. 5. Tom Lawlor, 7-3, won no contest, beat Patrick Cote, 14-7, via straight scores of 30-27. Lawlor dominated all 3 rounds and you couldn't dispute this. Dull fight, as Lawlor seemed to be fighting and playing it safe since he didn't want to be cut. Lawlor went for a choke in the first round but Cote got out. Lawlor in the second. He threw short shots and then took Cote. Lawlor got another takedown. Third round saw Lawlor go for the takedown in an arm triangle. Lawlor landing punches and elbows. Some boring chants and the crowd is mostly quiet. While this seemed like a terrible fight for Spike, unlike the Nick Lentz vs Andre Winner fight that killed the rating actually went up as this fight went on. Ref John McCarthy would order a stand-up and Lawlor would take him down again. Lawlor did minimal damage and mostly held him down for 3 rounds to win. Cote suffered an eye injury. Lawlor got $20,000 for the win and Cote and $21,000 for the loss. 6. Court McGee, 12-1, beat Ryan Jensen, 16-6, with a triangle choke at 1:21 of the third round. This was McGee's first fight since winning TUF. Both came out aggressive and Jensen decked him in the opening seconds, and then took him down after McGee got up. Jensen threw a knee as McGee got up. McGee was a big favorite. Jensen landed several punches and hurt McGee. Jensen continued to land and easily won the first round. Jensen was bleeding from the nose, however. McGee came back after blocking a takedown and landed a lot of punches. Jensen kept going for the takedown but McGee blocked him. Both were landing punches and it turned into a good fight, but the crowd wasn't that into it. McGee landed more punches and got a takedown late. The fight should have been tied 19-19 going into round 3. McGee opened the round with punches, then scooped up Jensen and slammed him down. He got full mount and started throwing elbows, and finally locked in an arm triangle. Jensen's left eye was messed up. McGee appeared to have broken his right hand. McGee got $30,000 for the win while Jensen got $10,000 for the loss. 7. Brendan Schaub, 8-1, beat Gabriel Gonzaga, 11-6, via straight 30-27 scores. Crowd was pretty hot for this one starting, but it wasn't much of a fight. The story of the fight is that it was all standing and Schaub was more aggressive and easily outlanded Gonzaga to win every round. Gonzaga seemed slow and tentative throughout. Schaub dominated the first round with punches, and blocked when Gonzaga tried to take him down. Schaub knocked him down right at the horn ending the first round. It was almost a 10-8 round. Schaub continued this in the second round, bloodying Gonzaga's nose. In the third round, Schaub went for a takedown, which seemed like bad strategy since Gonzaga is world-class in jiu-jitsu. But as long as it was standing, that was irrelevant. Gonzaga sprawled away. Schaub continued to land punches. Crowd was booing as time was running down. Schaub again went for a takedown late, and in the scramble, Gonzaga got behind and locked on a choke but time ran out. That last takedown attempt nearly cost Schaub the fight. Schaub got $20,000 for the win and Gonzaga got $67,000 for the loss. 8. Matt Hamill, 11-2, beat Tito Ortiz, 16-1, via scores of 29-28, 29-28 and 30-27. Ortiz physically looked great. Hamill got a mixed reaction with mostly cheers. Ortiz got a huge reaction, but about 70% boos even though they were in Anaheim, near Huntington Beach, where he grew up. Ortiz came out strong and the crowd started chanting for him. Then they started chanting for Hamill. As Ortiz threw a kick, Hamill took him down. Ortiz back up and threw a high kick. Ortiz was cut on the side of his head and Hamill was bleeding from the right ear. After another punch, Ortiz started bleeding under the right eye. Ortiz even landed a spinning back fist late in the round. Hamill landed a series of punches late including a god uppercut. It had Ortiz winning the first round, but Hamill was competitive. Ortiz landed an overhand right and a knee early, but then started slowing down. Ortiz was winning the stand-up, but Hamill got the takedown and landed elbows and lefts, got side control, and stayed on top until the end of the round to win it. Hamill opened the third round with a left hook. Ortiz started landing early, but as the round wore on, Hamill was the one the landing. Ortiz went for a takedown but Hamill stuffed it. Hamill won the round with a takedown with 1:26 left as it was even up until that point. Hamill spent the rest of the fight with punches and elbows, many of which got past Ortiz's defense, as he kept Ortiz on his back the rest of the round. Hamill got $58,000 for the win and Ortiz got $250,000 for the loss. That salary, plus he gets points on the pay-per-view, is going to make it tough to keep Ortiz at that level since he hasn't won a fight since 2006 and people are catching on that he's not at the top level anymore. 9. Diego Sanchez, 24-4, beat Paulo Thiago, 13-3, on scores of 30-26, 29-28 and 29-28. I had 29-28, and I don't know how Sanchez could have won the first round. This was a great fight. Sanchez looked in his best shape in a long time. He was also cheered more than anyone on the show except Velasquez. They traded punches and Thiago was landing strongly. Sanchez went for a takedown but Thiago blocked and threw knees from the clinch. Thiago grabbed a bodylock and took Sanchez down on his back with 2:12 left. The crowd was very loud until the strong takedown quieted them down. Thiago nearly got a choke but Sanchez escaped. More knees by Thiago and he tried another choke. Sanchez escaped and got back up. Thiago was bleeding from the bridge of the nose. Sanchez with punches and a knee, but again couldn't get a takedown. Thiago unloaded with a flurry as the round ended. Good opening round. Sanchez got a takedown to start the second round. Very strong round. Thiago threw an elbow to the back of the head and Sanchez was asked if he was okay. Thiago tried a omoplata, but Sanchez pulled out. Sanchez started throwing punches from the top. Then, in one of the wildest minutes ever, Thiago actually monkey flipped Sanchez, but then Sanchez recovered and did a running power slam, and was firing punches from the top. Crowd was chanting Diego, as he got Thiago's back and worked for a choke. Sanchez was throwing punches until Thiago got up and started throwing punches and kicks. It appeared to be tied going into the third round. Thiago came in going for a takedown, but Sanchez blocked and landed on top. Sanchez working the fast pace had Thiago tire. He got Thiago's back, locked on a body triangle and went for a choke. Thiago blocked it so Sanchez was firing punches. He got on top of Thiago and got a full mount and was punching. Sanchez went for a choke but Thiago escaped. Thiago went for a leg lock but Sanchez spun, got back position and started throwing punches. Thiago escaped a choke, and then went for a choke of his own. Sanchez was out and on to throwing punches. He continued to land, nailing about 20 punches in the final seconds. The round was close to a 10-8 domination for Sanchez. Sanchez got $170,000 for the win, including a $70,000 best match bonus. Thiago for $88,000 for the loss, including his best match bonus. 10. Jake Shields, 26-4-1, beat Martin Kampmann, 17-4, on a split decision on scores of 30-27, 28-29 and 29-28. Shields was billed in his intro as a former world champion, but on the broadcast they did acknowledge him being champion in Strikeforce and Elite XC. Shields did well in the first round, getting a takedown, side control and full mount. Kampmann back up, but Shields took him down again. Kampmann got up and defended well but did nothing on offense. Even when they were at a distance, Kampmann seemed afraid to commit to his strikes for fear of being taken down. Kampmann blocked a takedown attempt, but when he threw a punch, Shields took him down again. Kampmann got back up right away. Second round saw Shields fail on a takedown. Shields put him against the fence. Little was happening and the crowd started booing. Shields got the takedown, but Kampmann was back up and threw a knee that busted Shields' nose. Kampmann threw more knees, hurting Shields, but then Shields got a takedown. Kampmann right back up and landed a knee to the body. I had Kampmann taking the round. Crowd was booing heavily at the end of the round, and Shields looked tired and worried. Shields couldn't get takedowns early in the third round. Kampmann got his back and was pounding on him. Kampmann was pounding on him but Shields got back up. Shields tried for a takedown and couldn't get it. Kampmann went for a choke but Shields got out. Kampmann used a cravat and Shields got out of that. Kampmann went for a guillotine but Shields escaped and was on top. Shields then got Kampmann's back in a body triangle as time ran out. Crowd loudly booed the fight. Shields got $150,000 for the win and Kampmann got $27,000 for the loss. 11. Cain Velasquez, 9-0, beat Brock Lesnar, 5-2, at 412 to win the UFC heavyweight title. Lesnar got a deafening reaction of both boos and cheers. Velasquez got a good reaction, all cheers, but nothing like Lesnar. Lesnar exploded out of the blocks and started wildly throwing. Nobody guessed that is his strategy because of how much energy it burns. Lesnar couldn't take Velasquez down at first, and in the exchange of punches, Velasquez was landing the disciplined shots like a boxer fighting a wild brawls. Lesnar then took Velasquez down, but he popped right up taking no damage, which was a major psychological boost for Velasquez. Lesnar moved him into the fence and ducked low for a takedown and got it. Velasquez again got right back up. They traded punches and Velasquez landed a high kick. He then took Lesnar down and started pounding on him. A punch and a hard knee knocked Lesnar down and he was wobbly. Apparently there was an elbow to the side of the head that threw off Lesnar's equilibrium, which was the real cause of the fight to go south for him. Lesnar got up, but stumbled and went back down. Velasquez was pounding on him. Lesnar was bleeding badly. Because of what happened in Lesnar's last fight, Herb Dean wasn't quick to stop it. There were reports that Lesnar may have yelled a submission, but Velasquez said he never heard it. Lesnar was taking a beating until ref Herb Dean had to stop it. One of the biggest crowd reactions in UFC history for the win. The whole fight had the crowd going crazy and the pop was such because I don't think most actually believed Velasquez had a good chance of winning. Lesnar was very gracious in defeat, saying, "I expected nothing less from him. He's a great fighter. Congratulations Cain. I had a good training camp. What can I say? He was better than me tonight." Velasquez got $270,000 for the win including a best knockout bonus. Lesnar got a listed $400,000. Both will receive considerably more. Including his pay-per-view bonus, Lesnar will probably wind up near $3 million, and he could even end up with more than that. We'll have more in the next issue on The Undertaker/Brock Lesnar confrontation after Lesnar's title loss. What happened was as Lesnar was leaving to go backstage after his loss, Ariel Helwani was interviewing Undertaker. On the clip, Undertaker, sitting in the front row, tickets courtesy of the UFC, looked at Lesnar and asked if he wanted to go right now. Lesnar kept walking. Helwani didn't know about the angle the two were doing and was shocked, although he did get Undertaker to say that if he was 20 years younger, would he have done MMA instead of pro wrestling. He said it was a lock that he would have, but he was too late in the game to make the change. The short version is that dialogue has been floated about Lesnar appearing at WrestleMania in a role similar to that of Floyd Mayweather from 2 years ago. Mayweather received 7 figures, not the $20 million said, but a couple of million was real, as a guest star. While Lesnar makes huge money in MMA, appearing at Mania would give him a chance to make very close to a big fight number, maybe even more, without having to go through a hard training camp and a fight. That info was a well-guarded secret that very few are aware of. I don't believe a formal offer was made, but dialogue did exist. Undertaker chartered a flight from Anaheim to Minneapolis, since he couldn't afford to risk commercial travel and a problem that could get him in late. When he got to the show, he was vague about what happened or why it happened. It's said almost nobody knew. Dana White wasn't clued in. Helwani wasn't either. It was just lucky he was there, but if he wasn't, the confrontation would have happened and they likely were counting on either someone with a phone would take video or people at ringside would see it and word would get out, and probably and without video, the word would likely end up being magnified as people's imaginations would run wild. A lot of people thought the confrontation was legitimate based on past heat between the two. Stories abounded about there being heat over a girl from years back. Heat over the night Undertaker refused to put Lesnar over in a pay-per-view main event, which ended up leading to a bigger match where Undertaker did put him over, or heat over the way Lesnar left the company with the idea Undertaker was mad because Lesnar didn't return the favor and put him over. While Undertaker and Lesnar may not have been social friends, there was mutual respect. Undertaker is actually a Lesnar fan and one of the biggest UFC fans among the WWE performers. The idea was to test the waters. Nothing was said on WWE television, because Undertaker was being buried alive at the pay-per-view and teased not to return, so it made no sense. Plus, there is no deal. It only makes sense that Lesnar would be interested in doing something if he can get that kind of money. However, the issue is White has made it clear that he will not allow anyone under contract to do pro wrestling. White told TMZ.com that they have Lesnar under an exclusive contract that doesn't allow him to do boxing or pro wrestling without his permission. WWE creative didn't even know what was or wasn't real the next day, but apparently were clued in and told to come up with ideas, based on Lesnar being a guest referee for Undertaker's Mania match. This week talked about being against either Kane, or more likely, Wade Barrett. The idea would be to tease a confrontation between the two, similar to the Steve Austin/Mike Tyson angle in 1998. The idea of Lesnar versus Undertaker in a singles main event, while obviously the dream main event scenario for Mania, had issues over the finish. When the idea was cooked up, Lesnar was UFC champion and wasn't going to lose at Mania, and they didn't want Undertaker losing. While almost nobody expects Lesnar to return to pro wrestling anytime soon, perhaps never, because he hated the travel, making huge money for a single date and not having to do the schedule is a different ball game. Vince McMahon filed a lawsuit against the state of Connecticut on October 26 in federal court seeking an injunction against Connecticut Secretary of State Susan Bysiewicz statement a few days earlier that those running polls would be allowed, at their discretion, to ask people wearing WWE garb to please cover it up when they enter the polling place. Bysiewicz, a Democrat, announced this past week that polling places would have the right to ask people coming to vote wearing WWE t-shirts or wristbands to ask them to cover them up, take the merchandise off before entering the polling place, or ask to go home and change before entering the polling place. Within hours of the suit being filed, Bysiewicz contacted local registrars of voters and town clerks telling them to allow people wearing WWE merchandise into the polling places. There is in most states, laws differ by state, including Connecticut, a 75-foot zone around the polling places where nothing with a political message or any kind of political sign is allowed to be brought in or worn. The rules are often not enforced, and in this case, this was not an order that people wouldn't be allowed, but that the polling places would have the right to ask people to cover it up. That's not unheard of. In California, when Arnold Schwarzenegger ran for governor, people were asked, and in some places told to cover up, not to wear any Schwarzenegger merchandise or any merchandise related to movies he has filmed. In other cases, when elections have included votes on public money to build new arenas and stadiums, the same goes for wearing jerseys or t-shirts for the local sports team that would benefit. Avi Harris, a spokesperson for Bisux, told the Hartford Courant that Bisux made the statement in an informal conversation with registrars of voters who asked, based on the line, whether WWE merchandise would be allowed in polling places. Harris said that the merchandise could be considered political because the WWE brand is so ubiquitously associated with the McMahons. She said full discretion would be left to the local poll workers. Bisux said people could be asked to cover it up, go home and change, or take it off before voting. Vince McMahon responded both in tape and print by saying, "Denying our fans the right to vote, denying them their First Amendment rights, regardless if they are Democrat, Republican or Independent, is un-American, unconstitutional and blatantly discriminatory." McMahon, whose wife was trailing by double digits in the latest polls, with momentum having stalled and moved in the other direction the past few weeks, stated that he was going to wear WWE merchandise when he voted. "On behalf of my company, WWE fans and any Connecticut citizen who wants to exercise their constitutional right to vote, I have filed a lawsuit today asserting that Susan Bisux's directive that allows poll workers to refuse registered voters wearing WWE merchandise the right to vote is a flagrant act of censorship and discrimination," said Vince McMahon in a press release announcing the suit. "The Secretary of State's directive threatens to violate my right to vote, and, in my view, my rights to free speech and expression," Vince McMahon said. After the issue was settled, with McMahon claiming victory, he attempted to act like it was Blumenthal he scored the victory over. It is up to the Attorney General to rule on such cases. Blumenthal, when the controversy started, refused to get involved because it was a no-win for him. Ruling against his Secretary of State, or ruling against the husband of the person he's running against, would come off as partisan and made him look bad. When the issue came up, Blumenthal's campaign manager Mindy Myers said, "We don't consider WWE clothing to be political or covered by the law that restricts political action close to polling places. People should be able to wear their WWE clothes to vote." Attorney General Richard Blumenthal should have immediately stepped in to enforce the law, said McMahon after it had been settled. "As a result of the Attorney General's inaction, I brought suit to enforce these basic, fundamental constitutional rights." Within hours of filing the lawsuit, Bisux reversed her position and immediately notified all local registrars of voters and town clerks via email. "I'd agree with him if they were denying anyone the right to vote, but nobody suggested that." Harris in fact, made the point that nobody would be prevented from voting. There is an irony of Vince McMahon, of all people, complaining about this since the company has had a long-standing policy of asking people to cover up certain t-shirts at TV tapings that they don't want shown, and regularly confiscating signs and have kicked people out of arenas over it in the past. Some have gotten mad at that analogy, saying attendance at an entertainment event is not a right to attend like voting in an election is. But unless someone is being denied the ability to vote, so such rights have been taken away. It's hardly a First Amendment violation or unconstitutional given that there are specific laws in the books that cover it, although the law can be interpreted in different ways. Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler were told to address it on Raw by telling people not to wear WWE t-shirts when they vote, giving the impression they were mocking the ruling as absurd. Bisux worked with McMahon a few years ago on the SmackDown Your Vote campaign, which was nonpartisan. One thing that has surprised me is that nobody picked up on the supposed nonpartisan SmackDown Your Vote campaign that started in 2000, and how on the Monday night before the Bush-Gore election, Lawler on Raw, when Raw was doing huge ratings, went on a long pro-Bush anti-Gore diatribe in an election that was one of the closest and most controversial in history. Going in, the big story regarding the bragging rights pay-per-view seemed to be whether it would set new business lows. Last year's show did 181,000 buys worldwide, which doesn't sound bad today given drops in numbers, but it was the second lowest total, behind Breaking Point, the all-submission match pay-per-view which was then dropped from the schedule this year, of the year. The only reason bragging rights was brought back for this year, and still scheduled for next year, is because they thought it made sense as a promotional aid to the SmackDown vs. Raw video game. Add to that coming the day after the Brock Lesnar fight, and going head-to-head with a NFL blockbuster, Minnesota Vikings featuring the league's top television draw, Brett Favre, in the middle of a scandal, facing his old team the Green Bay Packers, which on the overnights did a 16.0 rating, the third highest rating in the history of regular season Sunday Night Football, and this show seemed DOA. The only positive is with the San Francisco Giants beating the Philadelphia Phillies the night before, it didn't go against the seventh game of the National League Championship Series. Based on our response level, the show won't do as bad as figured. But we may have gotten more responses than usual from people venting, because the show was probably WWE's worst pay-per-view show so far this year. But we got the same level response as most of the B shows get. As for the show, it was flat, with a dead crowd for many of the matches, and a lot of weak finishes. The show started out great with a Daniel Bryan vs Dolph Ziggler match, a non-title battle of the US champion vs IC champion that was given more than 1,600 hours. But it fell flat from there. Much of the show was based on the Nexus angle. First, in an unannounced match, John Cena and David Otunga beat Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre to win the tag team titles. The story of the match is that Cena basically worked the match by himself, and won the tag titles single-handedly. The next night on Raw from Green Bay, after Otunga said he wanted Cena fired, since Cena gave him an attitude adjustment after the match, Wade Barrett agreed that Cena and Otunga couldn't get along. He ordered them to defend against Justin Gabriel and Heath Slater, and then ordered Otunga to lay down and get pinned. This added an interesting layer because Otunga was mad about being humiliated. Later, Nexus interfered in the Kane vs Undertaker match, allowing Kane to retain his world title in the Buried Alive match. The loss in the Buried Alive angle was due to shoulder problems Undertaker has been having. We didn't get an update, but the last word is that there was a good chance that he would need shoulder surgery, which would put him out of action for several months. While he could have continued to work on it, the fear was that not getting it fixed could worsen the injury. Then, if it got so bad that he needed surgery, say in 2 months, the recovery could keep him out of WrestleMania. It is not a sure thing he'll have surgery, and the primary thing seems to be when it comes to timing is making Mania. He may avoid surgery for fear he wouldn't get back in time for Mania, but either way, he's resting the shoulder up or getting it fixed now. With WrestleMania not doing well last year, and with Undertaker due to his streak being the biggest WrestleMania star left on the show with Shawn Michaels having retired, there was at least talk of getting it taken care of as soon as possible, or maybe working through it because they don't want to risk missing the show. But if so, he's not going to be around for a while either way, and will return for whatever his Mania angle will be. There is at least the tease of a long-term storyline. Barrett noted that there was a reason they interfered. Later in the show, Otunga tried to almost blackmail Barrett by saying he would reveal the reason, and Barrett tried to keep him from doing so. Then, in the WWE title match, Barrett, before the match, told Cena that if Orton won, then Cena would be fired from WWE, making it important to make sure that he won the title. But there was a loophole that Cena took advantage of. As Orton was about to win, setting up the RKO after a draping DDT, Cena hit the ring and picked up Barrett and gave him the attitude adjustment. Because Cena interfered, in theory, helping Orton, it was ruled that Orton was disqualified. He retained his title, but wasn't happy. Barrett won the match, but wasn't happy because he didn't win the title. This kind of a finish is fine for television, but when people are spending $44.95, and in some cases, $54.95 to see the show, I think it leaves a bad taste, and this was the taste of the end of the show. The finish was kind of clever from a storyline standpoint, but I don't think it's the kind of finish you should end a pay-per-view show with, particularly when you had outside interference in the other title match. I thought between the flat matches after the opener and the bad finishes, this was the worst WWE pay-per-view show this year. To me, when you are down to the core audience, you should give that audience something to make people who missed it kick themselves for missing it. Those shows more than others are important to have kick-ass shows. The next pay-per-view offering is Survivor Series on November 21st in Miami. The main event is an Orton vs Barrett title rematch, with Cena as referee. In this one, if Orton wins, then again, Cena is fired from WWE. However, if Barrett wins the title, then Cena is relieved of having to be in Nexus. As late as last week, they were happy with the heat of Cena in Nexus being bullied by Barrett and were talking of taking it to Royal Rumble. If Barrett wins the title, this would seem to shorten that time frame considerably. If stipulations had been adhered to and the title was over, this would be a strong main event. The SmackDown main event has Kane defending against Edge, who was the star of SmackDown's win over Raw in the bragging rights match. Nothing else was announced this week, but on Raw there were teases for Bryan vs CM Punk in a US title program which has a lot of potential, Because Punk won't work with Bryan in the Bryan is a Geek mode, as noted by his commentary that was the first tease of this program. Win or lose, Punk will put him over like he's a top guy. John Morrison and Sheamus started a program on TV. Survivor Series usually has elimination matches, but with an elimination match as the main event at SummerSlam and again in a key match at Bragging Rights, as well as on several television shows, one wonders if they'll even go in that direction. Survivor Series was nearly dropped as a name. In fact, Vince McMahon decided to drop it after last year's show didn't do well on pay-per-view. However, he was talked into going back to the name, which was a good idea. The name, while not at the level of Royal Rumble or SummerSlam, still yielded above-average results. Last year's show was hurt coming a day after a UFC pay-per-view, as is the case again this year. The next UFC show has Quinton Jackson vs Lyoto Machida and BJ Penn vs Matt Hughes as the double headliner. It's not a blockbuster show, but it will probably do better than last year's show did with Tito Ortiz vs Forrest Griffin. Ticket sales were slow in Minneapolis, going head-to-head with the Vikings game, but the Target Center had a decent crowd under the circumstances, with nearly 9,000 fans and about 7,000 paid. Perry Saturn, who lives in Albert Lea, Minnesota, and hasn't been to a WWE event in 8 years, was backstage at the show. He turned 44 the next day. Saturn had disappeared for years, with his family not being able to find him and most of his best friends for years thought he was dead, particularly when he didn't come to the funeral of Killer Kowalski. But he was rumored to be living in the city, and got married last year, and it was the wedding that was listed in a newspaper that indicated he was still alive, and confirmed by a member of his new family posting a family photo on MySpace a year ago. Also backstage at the show included John Sir Oliver Humperdinck Sutton, Greg Gagne, and Bill Irwin. Actor Freddie Prinze Jr., who is now working producing vignettes, was also at the show. MVP pinned Chavo Guerrero in the dark match. 1. Daniel Bryan beat Dolph Ziggler in 16:15. Neither title was at stake. Fans were chanting Bryan from early in the match and the crowd was hot for this. Michael Cole was pushing Bryan with the nickname Mr. Bland. Not sure that's going to help get him over, as historically people who the promotion pushed as not being colorful, or as boring, have never overcome the tag. They did good early mat work, with Ziggler doing amateur takedowns and riding based on his background, and Bryan working for submissions based on his training. Bryan came off the apron with a flying knee to the floor. He also did a great running dropkick. One thing I have to note is that Matt Striker was completely toned down as an announcer on the show. He oversold the SmackDown beating Raw finish, but that worked as part of the show. But the usual Strikerisms were gone. Lawler told a joke about Vickie Guerrero saying a car crashed into her because they were afraid they'd run out of gas going round her. Lawler would make fun of her weight, which would probably run their much talked about female viewership the wrong way if it wasn't for the fact Vickie is such a great heel. Michael Cole and Striker kept putting over how beautiful she was. Lawler started making fun of Striker, calling one of Bryan's holds the cattle mutilation, as if Lawler realized that's actually the name the hold has been given ever since he started using it. He didn't do the move in this match. Bryan did moves like a kick to the face, a flying kick and a springboard dropkick for near falls. Ziggler went for the zigzag, but Bryan held the ropes, so Ziggler took the bump. Bryan used a kick to the head for another near fall. After crotching Ziggler, Bryan used a backward superplex, but Ziggler reversed in midair for a near fall, and then Bryan reversed it into a cradle for another near fall. This elicited a "This is awesome" chant. After more near falls, Ziggler used the famous and the ref counted to 3. However, he saw Bryan's foot on the ropes and restarted the match. Ziggler used the sleeper, but Bryan made the rope. Ziggler then started yelling at the ref, and that gave Bryan the opening for the label lock. After the match, Guerrero and Ziggler were complaining to the ref, who then threw Vickie out of the match. The match was over, but it still got an easy pop. 3.5 stars. They did a comedy bit with Bragging Rights Team Raw, basically playing up that nobody was treating Miz like the boss. When Miz said he was the captain, CM Punk called him Captain Crunch. Santino Marella did comedy. Punk said he was on the winning SmackDown team last year, so everyone should listen to him. Sheamus told Miz he'd kick his head off and Punk laughed about it. 2. John Cena and David Otunga won the WWE Tag Titles, beating Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre in 6:27. This started with Rhodes and McIntyre coming out and McIntyre saying, "All the boys in the back are scared of us." Then the computer said that there was a team that wanted to face them. Wade Barrett came out and said Cena and Otunga would challenge them for the title. Cena worked almost the entire match. Otunga kept wanting to tag in and Cena ignored him. For the finish, Cena blocked crossroads by Rhodes, and put the STF on him in the middle for the tap. For some reason, McIntyre didn't even try and make a save. Otunga then did this big celebration like he had won something, which was funny. They noted he became tag champion because of his partner, and they joked how Otunga is known for mooching off his partner, in reference to his only being known and getting into WWE and getting his push largely because he's Jennifer Hudson's fiancé. Cena then gave Otunga the attitude adjustment and held up both belts himself. I thought it was way early for Cena to be getting any offense in on Nexus members, but if they are rushing the time frame of the completion of the angle, then it doesn't really matter. Crowd wasn't into the match, although Cena got his usual dueling chants at one point. 1-1/2. 3. Ted DiBiase pinned Goldust in 7:27. Goldust came out with the $1 Million belt, but this was not announced as a title match. Unlike when his father held the same title and it was defended like a championship, this is just something you steal back and forth. The wrestling here was good, but the match had no heat. Maryse attacked Oksana to try and steal the belt back. Oksana, getting beaten up, sold comically by continuing to pull her short dress down. She was wearing shorts underneath. There should be a lesson here when it comes to ring combat. If you are going to get into a brawl where you are selling, you shouldn't be wearing a short dress unless you are in PG and the idea is for it to ride up. Oksana started crying. Goldust, who has fallen for her, they are doing a wedding in a week or two on the internet NXT show of all places, was distracted. DiBiase hit the DDT and pinned him. After the match, with Maryse now holding the belt, Oksana attacked her and took the belt. DiBiase then cornered Oksana. Oksana then started coming on to DiBiase, who seemed to like it. This allowed Goldust to come up from behind and deliver the final cut, and Goldust and Oksana left together with the belt. Michael Cole was throughout this match defending Goldust in commentary. 2 stars. 4. Layla retained the Divas title, pinning Natalya in 4:48. Layla and Michelle McCool came out making fun of people from Minnesota. They mostly talked about how all the women are fat. Stryker, who always puts over their segments, called this one Shockmaster bad. Once again no heat. Natalya did a delayed vertical suplex while doing quarter squats, which was different. McCool tried to interfere, but Natalya threw her into the barricade. But the match looked bad from there. At one point Layla grabbed the belt and waved to leave. Natalya ran outside and attacked her and threw her back in the ring. But McCool kicked Natalya in the head and Layla pinned her. 1/4-1. 5. Kane beat Undertaker in 16:53 in the Buried Alive match to keep the world title. The match opened with a "We Want Blood" chant, which must have thrilled the company on a live show. Fortunately that ended quickly. Mostly brawling in the stands. Crowd was dead in this match as well. Undertaker started throwing chairs in the ring and also threw in the top of the announcer's table, which accidentally hit Kane. When Undertaker got in the ring, Kane grabbed a chair and nailed Undertaker in the gut and hit Undertaker with 3 chair shots to the back. The one thing I've noticed about chair shots to the back is because wrestling has had so many years of chairs to the head, people don't react to chairs to the back because they expect them to the head. I'm wondering if you just need to put a moratorium on chairs for a little while, so people will react just seeing the chair used, as opposed to now where they expect a hard shot to the head and don't react unless they get it. More chair shots by Kane and 2 choke slams. Since there were no pins, Kane had to carry Undertaker to near the entrance area where they had a tombstone and an open grave for someone to be put in. Kane tried to put him in the grave, but Undertaker caught Kane in the go-go plata. Kane started tapping, but no submissions here. Kane then passed out. Undertaker threw him in the grave. He was about to start burying him, but he spotted Paul Bearer. He threw Bearer's face in the dirt. He was about to chokeslam Bearer into the grave when Nexus all attacked him. They all first bumped for Undertaker, until the numbers game became too much. They were beating him down, and Kane emerged from the grave. As they held Undertaker, Kane nailed him with the urn. The Nexus guys started shoveling dirt on him when Kane told them to leave. Kane then did his magic stuff, which caused a tractor position near the site to drop tons of dirt on Undertaker, and leave him buried alive once again. 1. 6. Team SmackDown of Big Show and Rey Mysterio and Edge and Kofi Kingston and Jack Swagger and Tyler Rex and Alberto Del Rio, with mascot Hornswoggle, won the Bragging Rights Cup for the 2nd straight year, beating Team Raw of The Miz and CM Punk and John Morrison and Ezekiel Jackson and Santino Marella and R-Truth and Sheamus when Edge and Mysterio were the final survivors at 27:43. I was genuinely surprised at the outcome, because SmackDown got the better of Raw in most of the angles and key outcomes building up to the match on TV. Hornswoggle was dressed up like a Viking since they were in Minnesota. R-Truth got like 5% of his usual ring entrance reaction due to the new song not being over. Everyone had to wrestle in identical t-shirts, red for Raw and blue for SmackDown. This made the match look incredibly low rent. Except for the last few minutes, there wasn't much heat and a lot of the match dragged with people the crowd didn't know or care about. Rex pinned Marella in the first fall in 2:35. Marella teased doing the Cobra, and the people popped for Marella. Rex hit him with a forearm and knocked him down, and then put him in the torture rack, and threw him off like a reverse attitude adjustment for the pin. Second fall saw Sheamus pin Kingston in 6:50. Kingston first used the SOS on him but Sheamus was able to grab the ropes to stop the count. Sheamus crotched Kingston on the top rope. He then brought him off the top with the high cross, Razor's Edge, for the pin. Morrison pinned Swagger in 13:05 with Starship Pain in the third fall. The key aspect here was Del Rio turning on Mysterio. He threw Mysterio into the barricade and Mysterio was selling his shoulder and help to the back. You were led to believe Mysterio had been eliminated at that point. You'd think being out of the ring for 8 minutes would constitute a count out. Well, maybe not since he wasn't the legal man. Sheamus pinned Rex in 14:29 after the Brogue Kick. They tried to push. It was impressive that the unknown Rex lasted so long but it wasn't as if anyone cared. Sheamus then threw down Hornswoggle outside the ring. Show jumped out of the ring to attack Sheamus and they were brawling in the aisle. Show tried to run back to the ring as the count got to 8, but he was too far away and too slow, and both were counted out in 15:26. At this point it became the Edge show, beating 3 opponents with the spear, since he's the one next challenging Kane for the title. R-Truth missed the axe kick and Edge speared and pinned him in 16:40. Edge then speared and pinned Morrison in 17:07. Punk put Edge up in the GTS, but Edge escaped and hit a DDT. Edge went for the spear, but missed. Del Rio then tagged in. Punk and Del Rio traded moves until Punk pinned him with a backslide in 18:02. Del Rio walked away smiling. The announcers told the story that he didn't even care that he lost. This appeared to leave Miz and Jackson and Punk vs Edge. But as Del Rio was leaving, Mysterio came back out and attacked Del Rio and rejoined the match. Stryker said it was like Willis Reed in Game 7, in the 1970 NBA playoffs. Willis Reed suffered a torn quad in Game 5, didn't play in Game 6, but shot himself up and came out and played Game 7, which inspired his team to beat the Lakers and win the championship that year. Mysterio and Punk had some good back and forth action and they brought up the two had been feuding at SmackDown and Mysterio beat Punk for his hair. But there was no heat. Mysterio escaped from the GTS. They did the Eddie Guerrero/Dean Malenko series of cradles and reversals from the ECW days, which would have been a lot better if Bryan and Ziggler hadn't done the exact same sequence in the opener. Mysterio pinned Punk in 24:06 with a 619 and a splash from the apron over the top into the ring. Mysterio was then bounced around by Jackson. Jackson went for his finishing urinage, but Mysterio turned it into a DDT. Mysterio hit the 619 and was supposed to do a springboard splash for the pin. There was a big mix-up, as Mysterio slipped. Either Mysterio told Jackson, or Jackson decided on his own, that the move was botched and they should continue, so Jackson kicked out. But the ref counted 3 anyway. Nobody knew how to react to this but they decided Jackson was eliminated in 26:10. This left Mysterio and Edge against Miz. Mysterio went for the 619 but Alex Riley, who had been at ringside the entire match, stopped him. This led to a spot where Mysterio gave the 619 to both Miz and Riley. He went for the springboard splash, but Miz got his knees up. Miz went for the pin, but Mysterio kicked out. Mysterio then hot tagged Edge in, and he speared and pinned Miz to take the match. 2 stars 1/4. 7. Wade Barrett beat Randy Orton via DQ in 14:36 so Orton retained the WWE title. John Cena was in Barrett's corner. After Barrett told Cena he would be fired if he didn't win the match, the fans started chanting "Fire Cena." This was more a storyline match that never really kicked into high gear. Barrett would throw Orton out of the ring and expect Cena to attack him while Barrett distracted the ref. But Cena wouldn't do it. The funny part of this is for years, Orton was Cena's mortal enemy, and now he won't attack him. Barrett would get mad. After the second time this happened, Orton attacked Barrett from behind. Crowd was dead for this match as well. Then came a ref bump and that deflated the crowd. There was an era when ref bumps picked up the crowd because it meant now we're working to the finish and all kinds of stuff is going down. Barrett told Cena to get on the apron. Barrett went to throw Orton into Cena, but Orton reversed the whip and Barrett knocked Cena off the apron. At this point, Otunga, Gabriel and Slater hit the ring and attacked Orton. Cena then ran in and tackled Gabriel and Otunga, while Orton laid out Slater with an RKO. Barrett went crazy on Cena, but Cena claimed he was saving things for Barrett because the ref was about to turn around, would see the outside interference, and Barrett would lose via DQ. Orton then made a comeback, hitting clotheslines and power slam and draping DDT. He went to set up for the RKO and Cena jumped in the ring and gave Barrett the attitude adjustment. The ref then DQ'd Orton and ruled Barrett the winner. This is only slightly less stupid than when Kurt Angle was bleeding and Eric Bischoff ruled the match a no contest instead of a Jeff Hardy win, which even makes less sense today. Your own corner man attacks you, so you get to win the match? Even in convoluted wrestling logic that makes no sense. Even less given the stipulations Barrett gave at the beginning. But it was sold like Cena outsmarted him by finding a loophole so Barrett would win but not get the title. 1/3. This is the second issue of the current 4-issue set. If you've got A1 on your address label, your subscription expires in 2 more issues. Renewal rates for the printed Observer in the United States are $11 for 4 issues, which includes $4 for postage and handling, $20 for 8, $28 for 12, $36 for 16, $54 for 24, $72 for 32, $90 for 40, $117 for 52 up through $144 for 64 issues. For Canada and Mexico, the rates are $12.50 for 4 issues, which includes $6 for postage and handling, $22 for 8, $32 for 12, $40 for 16, $60 or 24, $80 for 32, $100 for 40 issues, $130 for 52 and $160 for 64. For Europe, you can get the fastest delivery and best rates by sending to Moonsalt, P.O. Box 3075, Barnet, Hart CN49YR, England, or by sending email orders to moonsalt@mediaplusint.com. Rates are £9 per set of 4 issues. UK readers ordering at least 6 sets can get them for £8.50 per set. For the rest of the world, the rates are $14.50 for 4 issues, which includes $9 for postage and handling, $28 for 8, $40 for 12, $50 for 16, $63 for 20, $76 for 24, $87.50 for 28, $125 for 40 issues and $162 for 52 issues. You can also get The Observer on the web at www.wrestlingobserver.com for $10.99 per month for a premium membership that includes daily audio updates, Figure 4 weekly, special articles and a message board. If you are a premium member and still want hard copies of The Observer, you can get them for $7 per set in the US, $8 per set in Canada and $10.50 per set for the rest of the world. All subscription renewals should be sent to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. You can also renew via Visa or MasterCard by sending your name, address, phone number, Visa or MasterCard number, and include a 3 or 4-digit security code on the card, an expiration date to dave@wrestlingobserver.com or by fax to 408-244-3402. You can also renew at www.paypal.com using dave@wrestlingobserver.com as the pay-to address. For all credit card or PayPal orders, please add a $1 processing fee. All letters to the editor, reports from live shows and any other correspondence pertaining to this publication should also be sent to the above address. We also have copies of our latest book, Tributes to, a 293-page hardcover full-color book which features biographies right out of the pages of The Observer. Those featured are Wahoo McDaniel, Luthez Mississippi Elizabeth, Freddie Blassie, Road Warrior Hawk, Andre the Giant, Kurt Hennig, Johnny Valentine, Davey Boy Smith, Terry Gordy, Owen Hart, Stu Hart, Gorilla Monsoon, The Sheik, and Tim Woods. The book is available for $12.95 plus $3.50 for postage and handling in the U.S., $10 for postage and handling in Canada and $12 for postage and handling for the rest of the world. This publication is copyright material and no portion of The Observer may be reprinted without the expressed consent of publisher/writer Dave Meltzer or Deputy Managing Editor Scott Williams. Fax messages can be sent to The Observer 24 hours a day at 408-244-3402. Phone messages can be left 24 hours a day at 408-244-2455. Emails can be sent to dave@wrestlingobserver.com. TNA. The next pay-per-view is Turning Point on November 7th, with Jeff Hardy vs Matt Morgan for the TNA title. It was originally supposed to be Mr. Anderson, and they even advertised that match on their website, but it was changed. I'll know for sure next week, but would surmise because of Anderson's concussion. F2 vs Fortune match where the winning team can pick a member of the losing team to get fired. Tommy Dreamer vs RVD, Motor City Machine Guns vs Team 3D for the tag titles, Jay Lethal vs Robbie E for the X title, Madison Rayne vs Mickie James for the Knockouts title, Pope vs Abyss with fans as Lumberjacks, and Jeff Jarrett vs Samoa Joe. Most of the matches on the show don't even get announced until the Thursday before the show. In fact, the main event isn't even made until the final segment on the Thursday show. This isn't one of their focused shows. No word on when Sting and Angle come back, but that'll likely be the next focused pay-per-view show. Team 3D signed their new deals, although that's been a formality as the angle they're working on that starts at the next pay-per-view has been on the books from before the ECW angle started. They put the angle on hold so 3D could team up on the Hardcore Justice show. Spike has added 2 replay times for Reaction. Besides Thursday at 11 p.m., it'll be replayed on Friday night/Saturday morning at 12:30 a.m. and on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Reaction was originally earmarked for 10 shows. The ratings were good for the time slot, particularly when they artificially were able to jack them up by putting the Impact main event on Reaction. So they not only got a renewal but replay broadcasts. I think the show is a big positive because not only is it more TV revenue, but it builds the issues with less silliness than Impact does. Whether it helped make a difference with Bound for Glory is too early to tell. If the baseline shows like Turning Point move up a bit, then it has a dual effect, but the key is, even if it doesn't, it's not the kind of show that overexposes the matches and works against the pay-per-view model. Clearly it has no effect on arena business. Jeff Hardy was on the CBS talk show The Talk, their answer to The View, a show aimed at housewives, with a taped message for a kid who had his arm broken by bullies, saying he was proud of himself for standing up for himself and that he was sending him plane tickets to be his guest at a TV taping and sending him a bunch of TNA merchandise. Kind of funny that they put their lead heel in that position to be super babyface on network TV. Hernandez, who has been working of late with AAA as a full-timer, has his contract coming to next month here. Jesse Godderz of Big Brother denied he had been signed by TNA. He said there was nothing official after his dark match, nor did he expect any kind of announcement. Devin Nicholson, a Canadian independent wrestler and promoter known as Hannibal, got a tryout at the 10/24 show in Saginaw. Nicholson has a shoot background doing MMA, grappling and wrestling competition and has worked in Puerto Rico in the past. Taylor Wilde, Chantel Malowski, 24, was engaged recently to boyfriend Oliver Mitchell. Rhino's contract expires very shortly. Apparently Serge Salinas, Dixie Carter's husband, suffered a busted lip taking a punch in the segment on Impact backstage as the security was taking Dixie Carter out. Salinas was involved in the hardcore country song that James uses as her entrance music. They had a tough weekend. As is almost always the case, we got great reviews on the shows, and the people who attend are enthusiastic. This past week, the problem was lower than usual crowds, and a bug went around the locker room. Much of the crew was sick. Mr. Anderson, who was to headline the entire run against AJ Styles on top, was so sick, not sure if it's the after effects of the concussion he got from the chair shot, that he had to be sent home after the first day and they flew in RVD as a replacement. Samoa Joe and Earl Hebner were both still sick from last week. Joe worked shorter matches, although he was in a lot better spirits than last week. At times because he was acting fine and laughing backstage, some thought he wasn't that sick. However, he wasn't at TV, but that was scripted due to selling the injuries from the Abyss TV match. Don West and Jeremy Boresh were also sick. Michigan is tough with the bad economy. I mean, the economy is bad everywhere, but Michigan is pretty close to the worst. Still, this is the second straight weekend of bad crowds, as in well below usual, since the big angle was struck, and in theory, the first place you are supposed to see the difference is people coming to the shows. The Machine Guns were the most over every night, although RVD, who grew up in Battle Creek, was also very popular. Had Paul Heyman come in, the belief is he would have cleaned out creative and brought in Gabe Sapolsky and David Lagana as his assistants. Jeff Hardy missed the final 2 TVs that will air before Turning Point. His legal case was scheduled for 10/25, so it's possible that would have something to do with it. The Ric Flair ice thing is based on the idea they think someone being iced is cool and connects with the young male audience that they are trying to attract. The plan is to keep doing it. No idea where it's going. Crowds were 700 on October 21 in Grand Rapids, 500 on October 22 in Cadillac, 800 on October 23 in Saginaw and 700 on October 24 in Port Huron. In Grand Rapids, Rhino pinned Jeff Jarrett in the Backstage Passes opener. Jay Lethal pinned Eric Young in an X Division title match. Total comedy. Young thought it was a tag match with he and Lethal as a team, and that referee Brian Hebner was their opponent. When Hebner held up the belt before the match, Young snuck up and schoolboyed him, counted to 3 and paraded around like he had just won the title. Lethal then took off Hebner's shirt and put it on, and Young and Hebner started wrestling with Lethal acting as referee. Lethal won with the Randy Savage elbow. Madison Rayne pinned Angelina Love in the Knockouts title match. Rayne threw Love into Velvet Sky, who was also on the tour as Love's second. Machine Guns beat Generation Me in the tag title match in the best wrestling match on the show. Abyss pinned Sabu in a Monsters Ball match. Your typical weapons match, with Abyss using the Black Hole Slam. Main event saw Mr. Anderson pin AJ Styles in a non-title match with the mic check. The Saginaw show was the same thing except RVD was in the main event instead of Anderson, pinning Styles. 10/24 in Port Huron was the same show as the night before. In Abyss vs Sabu, Sabu got cut open hard way from a garbage can lid. He also landed badly after a botched slingshot. Abyss won clean with the Black Hole Slam. Notes from the 10/21 TV show. The funniest thing on the show was actually reaction. The whole show was talking about how Bischoff and Hogan swindled the company away from Dixie Carter. We get a whole hour of this going through this long involved story, which in some parts made sense, and in other parts didn't make sense. A key thing was Bischoff explaining that in the Kurt Angle vs Jeff Hardy semifinal how he stopped it for a cut, and whoever heard of a match being stopped on a cut, yes, here in 2010, who would ever hear of such a thing, and then he explained how he was helping Hardy, except the problem is, if it was stopped on a cut, Angle loses and thus, Hardy, the guy he's trying to push, wins. But he called it a draw. While saying he was favoring Hardy, his actual actions favored Angle because it kept him alive when he should have been eliminated. But they did a good job of explaining that all those weeks when Jeff Jarrett was cleaning toilets and flipping burgers that it wasn't a Jarrett and Foley vs Bischoff feud that they started and dropped for no reason without even a match, but part of the swerve. The idea was that Jarrett was mad because Dixie Carter sent him home over a personal situation. They never mentioned what it was, but we're all supposed to know because everyone knows Jeff is with Gert's ex-wife and Jeff lied to Dixie Carter when confronted about it. Actually, they should do one of their focus groups and see what people really know. And after an hour straight of how they screwed Dixie out of the company with his well-laid-out plan, they rolled the credits. Producers Eric Bischoff/Jason Hervey. Well, that's fine. Executive producer Dixie Carter. Carter herself was pretty clever about the miscue. Carter has been twittering like the angle is real and talking about how the people involved in swerving her out of the company will get theirs at some point. So when her name was shown as executive producer, she noted that's how stupid Bischoff is that he forgot to take it off. During the show, at times they said they had planned this for 7 months, but at other times they said the reason they did it was because Dixie Carter had insulted Flair and Hogan by saying what Hogan was to the 80s, ECW was to the 90s. I'm not sure how that insults Flair, but it does insult Hogan. A lot of people liked how they explained the story during the show, showing all the old clips. One person who should get a lot of credit for how the show was put together was Matt Conway. The Impact show also featured the return of the Hulk Hogan/Warrior angle from 1998, where Hogan sees Warrior, we see Warrior, but Warrior is invisible to everyone else. That killed the Hogan-Warrior rematch before it ever happened. So in the usual learning from the stupidity, well, at least it's being used in a program that doesn't matter anyway. But when you are doing a TV show where you want people to buy into your shit, why do it? The deal is Angelina Love can see Katie Lee Burchill, whose name is Winter. However, when she talks with her, nobody else can see Katie Lee Burchill, except us the viewing audience, and they all think that Love is losing her mind. Well, and we all think that Velvet Sky must be going blind. This was the Let's Get Mr. Anderson Over as Top Babyface show. In the sense it was good, except in building him up for his title shot. He lost now 2 weeks in a row. Anderson had his arm in a sling selling his shoulder being Pillmanized by Jeff Hardy last week. He called out Hardy. Instead, RVD came out. He noted Anderson wanted a shot at the title, but he deserves the shot because he never lost it in the first place. Hardy was on the screen doing a pre-produced promo doing his Antichrist routine. Eric Bischoff came out, plugged reaction, and ordered Anderson vs Kazarian in an X Division match. He met Ultimate X, and if Anderson just survived, he didn't have to win, he'd get the title shot. The deal is Anderson had no shot of winning because one arm was shot so he couldn't climb the ropes. He teased that someone in ECW had called him. They showed TMZ footage of Cookie yelling about JWoww, claiming last week was a 4-on-1 attack. They devoted a good deal of time, including an interview with JWoww and more video features. If this was a normal wrestling company, I'd be certain a pay-per-view match is coming with those two. Unfortunately, that will not mean one buy. I mean, not one. And it will suck. Kind of like 90% of the celebrity appearances in WCW. RVD went into the EV2 locker room and asked who sold out to Bischoff. For some reason, he jumped on Raven and went after him, and they had to be pulled apart. Let's see. Raven can't wrestle. But he can cut a hell of a promo. So let's put him in an angle where he's wallpaper and is on TV weekly and never says a word. Robbie E pinned Amazing Red in 140. Now during the match, they had to pipe in fake boos, so I guess even in that short of a period of time the crowd was dead. And when Robbie and Cookie did their promo, the crowd chanted boring. But I have to say, I love this act. Robbie looks great and performs the gimmick great. Becky Bayless does her role great as an annoying screaming low-class woman. I think in time the fans will catch on. He's using an RKO as his finisher, which doesn't have a name yet, and then called out Jay Lethal. Cookie screamed "Jersey's in the house, bitches," which is her catchphrase. The one thing about TNA right now is that it's not WWE instead of trying to be WWE like it was for so long. WWE is dumbed-down pro wrestling aimed at kids even though 78% of the viewers are adults. TNA is total trash pro wrestling aimed at people who the people running the company have no respect for, except those in the company are the ones losing the money. They showed Pope at a strip club cutting a promo. Again, WWE would never show one of its baby faces in a strip club. Mick Foley was shown on a book tour in a vignette where Brian Kendrick was trying to find deeper meaning in Foley's newest book and got it autographed. This was pretty funny. Fortune was backstage. AJ Styles talked about facing Pope in a street fight and would put his title up. James Storm called RVD STD. Ric Flair had to drink more Smirnoff Ice. Bischoff showed up and said that Fortune was banned from ringside in the Pope vs. Styles match and that if Styles got DQ'd, he'd lose the title. Wait a minute, a street fight has no DQ. But what do you expect from a company that had Mickie James do a promo challenging for a title, and in her promo she had the wrong person as champion and it aired as is? They were backstage and Miss Tessmacher showed up and asked the beautiful people for lessons in teaching her how to wrestle. Isn't that like someone wanting to learn how to book successful pro wrestling and going into Vince Russo's office and asking him to teach you? They blew her off. At that point, Katie Burchill as Winter began talking to Angelina Love, but nobody else but us in Love could see her. I think TNA should do a deal on your TV screen like the ignore button on a message board, where the characters who have little redeeming interest, you just push a button on your TV screen and they go away. Styles pinned Pope in 5:55 when Abyss used the Black Hole Slam to interfere, and since it's a street fight, not much could be done about it. The whole idea was to swerve the audience as Bischoff said he was running things down the middle, so you were supposed to think he wasn't going to allow interference. But instead, he ordered Abyss out. It was also time to start screwing with the babyfaces. Sarita was backstage doing yoga stretches. Pope tried to recruit Samoa Joe to help him, but Joe had no interest in helping him. Joe blew him off. Team 3D talked about their upcoming match with the Machine Guns where they are retiring, win or lose, which of course means they aren't retiring. Bubba wants to go into music. Somebody needs to put together some album covers. Bubba sings Neil Diamond classics, Bubba raps like Justin Bieber, Bubba sings Justin Timberlake. Flair and Bischoff were backstage on a cell phone talking to someone we are supposed to believe was Hulk Hogan. Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley were throwing a football while Sabin was ignoring the guy asking him a question about whether they'd face 3D. That's cool to portray the babyface as someone who won't even acknowledge people. Velvet Sky was out here for some reason that may or may not ever be explained. Generation Me showed up and argued with Sky. Me made fun of the Guns. Sabin and Shelley each decked one of them. Jeff Jarrett was backstage acting like he was so sorry for what he did with Angle and was going to apologize. You know, one well-done swerve every few months is awesome. One every few minutes is about as entertaining as watching Bischoff jack off. So Jarrett talked about how sorry he was he didn't hurt Angle worse and said Angle was gone forever, which is a code word for he'll be on TV real soon. Joe ran out after Jarrett, but Gunner and Murphy jumped him and all three worked over Joe and handcuffed him. Joe broke free, and even while handcuffed, the cuffs were in front, not with his hands behind his back, managed to choke Jarrett, But Gunner and Murphy saved and they beat him down. Jarrett threw Joe off the ramp and Joe probably took a bump on a crash pad. They showed Joe on the floor with blood all around him. This led to Mike Tenay telling Jarrett off. He said how for 8 years Jarrett told him that they were a team but Jarrett turned his back on everyone. Great, now we've got an angle with an announcer about to happen. Beer Money beat Sabu and RVD in 5:24. Match wasn't nearly what you'd think. Sabu had trouble working with them. The finish saw Storm try and spit beer into RVD's face, but he moved and it went in Ruta's face. Sabu then threw a chair at Storm, who moved, and the chair hit RVD. Ruta then pinned RVD. RVD then went after Sabu but the F2 guys broke it up. Mickie James pinned Sarita in 4:18 with a Thez press off the top and a botched kick. Most entertaining part of the match was Taz comparing James' boots to those of John Noor. Tara laid out James with the widow's peak. James was then shown wanting to go to Bischoff and Hogan's office to complain about what happened. Maybe she should just get on the plane and write a song about it. Anderson was getting ready for his match when the Red of Fortune all jumped him and beat him down. They carried him down the ramp. Kazarian went in the ring. Kazarian beat Anderson in 9:06 in an Ultimate X match. Anderson was fighting him with one arm. The X was much lower than in previous matches, being a little over 8 feet in the air. It's probably safer that way. Almost none of the usual Ultimate X style stuff and maybe the weakest match ever of this type. Anderson tried to climb once but with the bad arm, couldn't hold on and he fell down into the ring. Later, he did the mic check and went for a ladder. It should be noted that it's been said over and over that ladders are banned in Ultimate X. Anderson was climbing when Fortune all came out. Morgan powerbombed him off the ladder. He then had Kazarian climb up to his shoulders and he walked to the center, where Kazarian pulled down the X to win. They went for a beatdown but Anderson pulled out a pipe and chased everyone off. Hardy then did a run-in and cracked Anderson hard to the back of the head with a chair. You could see the indentation in the back of Anderson's head, and a shot in that part of your head is probably the single most dangerous place. I'm guessing that Hardy wasn't legitimately aiming for the back of the head, and was aiming for the upper back but the top part of the chair connected with the back of the head. At least I'm hoping that, because it would be way too irresponsible to actually crack someone in the back of the head with a chair. Anderson was bleeding heavy from it. Hardy then put Anderson's bad arm in between the ladder and smashed the top of the ladder with a chair. The show ended with Bischoff and Flair in a limo leaving when Angle, in his wrestling outfit, was standing in front of the car with his arm in a sling. Wasn't it his neck that they injured last week? He also had a pipe and smashed the back window of the limo. Notes on the 10/25 tapings for Impact on October 28. Nico, who is a Booker T student from Texas, debuted in a tryout match, losing to Kendrick. Kazarian pinned Rhino clean for Explosion. Not sure what that means with Rhino's contract situation, but this isn't a normal promotion where you can read anything into wins and losses given them putting Nash over Joe right before he left. I was told, and we'll see how this plays out on TV, but live that it came across like a ridiculous television show. The show opened with Flair hitting on a woman. Morgan came up and asked the woman to leave. Morgan then talked to Flair about messing around at work and told him look what happened to Brett Favre. Hey, at least we're being topical. He asked Flair if it's true what he heard and that Anderson is being forced to wrestle with a concussion. This is actually playing off a real-life story in the company. The veterans from the old school like Flair, Hogan, Jarrett, Earl Hebner, etc. think you work through injuries and illnesses so matter what, because that's what they did. The younger guys are a lot more cautious with their body, apparently learning from the mistakes of the previous generation. I don't know if this will work to the public as a storyline and it's too inside. We'll see how it plays on TV, but that's the genesis of all this. Flair told Morgan that wrestling was a tough sport and Morgan said it was one thing in his day when we didn't know better, but with all the studies on concussions, it isn't right. Flair said the difference was in his day, men were men, they took care of their business and Bischoff knows what he's doing. Robbie E. pinned Lethal in a non-title match to set up a title match in a street fight with all the ECW-style weapons around the ring. Cookie sprayed self-tanning spray in Lethal's eyes and Robbie hit the RKO for the win. They had a wild women's brawl. It started with Tara and Mickie James fighting at catering. They brawled outside and it wound up as a 6-woman brawl with Angelina Love, Velvet Sky, Sarita and Rain all involved. They brawled back into the arena and fought around the announcer's table. Then everyone wound up in the ring. Security came out with Flair. Flair was out there breaking it up and got punched by Tara, I guess playing off Flair's deal with his wife several months back. Flair squared off with Tara and got slapped a few times by James and took his face first flop. Flair started screaming at the women and they were all stunned and stopped fighting. Then, They all started fighting again. Flair and security broke it up and they set up a trios match for later. Flair went to Bischoff and asked where he was while all this was going on. Bischoff was laughing and said he was dealing with administrative stuff. Flair asked where Hogan was. He said Hogan was dealing with a major acquisition, first tease of Matt Hardy most likely. Bischoff then started yelling at Gunner and Murphy, saying they screwed up and Angle almost got to him and Flair last week and told them if they don't do better at their jobs, they may need new jobs. David Sahadi made his TV return as a good guy administrator hired by Dixie Carter. He asked Bischoff if they were really forcing Anderson to wrestle with a concussion. Bischoff said everyone was in agreement that Anderson should wrestle. Sahadi then talked about all the new research out on concussions and that Dixie Carter has pledged to protect the wrestlers, so they can't have Anderson wrestle with a concussion. Bischoff tells Sahadi to get his ass out of there. Pope came out for an interview with a casket. We get caskets this week on Thursday and Friday. Pope basically said he was going to finish off Abyss and put him in a casket. Abyss came out and said that Hogan and Bischoff told him to finish off Pope. He said he's not only going to finish Pope, but also his congregation. He then grabbed two fans in the crowd and I guess kidnapped them with Pope chasing after him. The F2 guys came out without RVD. Dreamer was the spokesperson and said that RVD hadn't returned anyone's phone calls, emails, texts or tweets. Strange how when guys are doing a wrestling angle they never return their messages. RVD came out and Dreamer said that they've been friends for 15 years and he wanted to nip this problem in the bud. Dreamer talked about how they saved the invasion angle. Next thing you know he'll be saying how he and RVD were the ones who wrote One Night Stand. He said it was RVD who told Dreamer to come to TNA and that what happened with Sabu last week was an accident. RVD said after what has happened, he doesn't know who to trust. Dreamer said he can trust them, that the problems are Hardy and that Bischoff was pulling the strings. Raven started laughing and RVD asked what he was laughing about. Raven said that Bischoff is just like him. Did Raven drive the most powerful wrestling company up to that point in time into oblivion? Raven said they are both evil masterminds. Fortune then came out and Flair talked about how F2 is at each other's throats while Fortune is united. Didn't this angle just air on WWE television? Flair noted the steps of the Fortune vs F2 match at Turning Point with the winning team getting to pick a member of the losing team to be fired. The Machine Guns kept the tag titles in a three-way over Shannon Moore and Jesse Neal and Generation Me. The Guns got the pin on Neal. Team 3D came out after the match and congratulated the Guns, and challenged them to a match. Bubba again put over TNA having the best tag team division in the world. He said they were retiring and wanted to go out against the best tag team in the world, and the Guns were the best team in the world. Alex Shelley called 3D living legends and they agreed to the match. Morgan went into Bischoff's office about wrestlers. Morgan asked if he thinks it's a good idea for a wrestler with a concussion to be wrestling. Bischoff said he thinks it's a great idea. Morgan said this is a safety issue and that he gave guys concussions and they were out of action for 3 months, not 1 week. Bischoff said it's safe for Anderson to wrestle. Rain and Tara and Sarita beat James and Love and Sky when Sarita pinned Sky with a double arm suplex. Williams and Styles beat RVD and Raven. RVD was in the ring selling. When he wasn't looking, Flair hit Raven with a belt shot and Raven juiced. When RVD went to tag, there was no Raven. Styles and Williams double-teamed RVD and Williams pinned him after a knee drop off the top rope. After the match, RVD started yelling at Raven and Raven walked out on him. Jarrett called out Anderson for the main event. But instead, Morgan came out to Anderson's music. Morgan said he and Jeff are friends, but nobody is listening to common sense and Anderson shouldn't be wrestling. He asked Jarrett to hear him out, saying that he knows Jarrett has been wrestling since he was 16, well, 19, and has wrestled with concussions. But we didn't know then what we know now. He said that we've all got to start looking out for the next generation. Jarrett asked if Morgan was kidding. Jarrett said it's all about survival and he doesn't care about Joe, Angle or anyone. Morgan then hooked the chain onto himself. Jarrett beat Morgan in the chain match with a low blow and the stroke. The guy just does his turn and in his first match he loses to a low blow? Morgan then attacked Jarrett after losing until Fortune came out to turn on Morgan and beat him down. Fortune came out to turn on Morgan and beat him down. Fortune came out to turn on Morgan and beat him down. Fortune came out to turn on Morgan and beat him down. Fortune came out to turn on Morgan and beat him down. Fortune came out to turn on Morgan and beat him down. Fortune came out to turn on Morgan and beat him down. Fortune came out to turn on Morgan and beat him down. Fortune came out to turn on Morgan and beat him down. Fortune came out to turn on Morgan.